So, Rob, Chris, welcome to Disclosure
Welcome.
Team. How are you both?
Great, Vinny. Thank you. Delighted to be on.
Just happy to be here, Vinny. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank yourself and, of course, Rob for inviting me along today. Really happy to be here.
No, it's great. It's really good to have you both. Ireland's such a close neighbour to me here in England, and I know both of you have been doing some incredible work. And I'd just love to really kind of get this conversation going by starting where I like to start with a lot of guests, and that is what first got you interested in UFOs?
Oh, Chris, you go first.
Well, yeah, probably because I'm the senior of the team here, I suppose. So, yeah. God, my interest goes back into UAPs or UFOs, or I actually remember they're flying saucers. That'll tell you my vintage, okay? Goes back to when I was born in '61 in Dublin. And always as a child, I was fascinated with, we always watched Doctor Who, that type of thing, and Star Trek, which came along later. Always had an interest in the phenomenon. It really tweaked, I'd say, in the '70s when we would buy our books in Eason's, which it's so easy now to get books and literature on the phenomenon. I got Lou's book there, out immediately, whereas that was a few years ago. I think we joked on Twitter saying that we'd be queuing up outside the shop in Dublin City Centre to get the book. So I got the books and I joined BUFORA, which would have been the British UFO Research Association. And in the Republic, in the mid '70s, I sort of ran BUFORA in the Irish Republic. And that then went on to become the Irish UFO Research Centre and so forth. So I've had an interest in the phenomena going back since I was a child. And it's a thread that's gone right through from when I was early teens to when I obviously now I'm, an adult. Well, I'll pretend to be an adult, So it's been with me all my life. Always had an interest in it. The last couple of years, and I'm sure that I don't think there's anything like a coincidence or such a thing as coincidence. We're all here this evening, and I think there's a purpose behind this. And a couple of years ago, I decided I'd create NHIdisclosure. And basically, I thought there's a vacuum in Ireland of people chasing the government in Ireland and the EU to what's going on. So I had a two-pronged approach. One was to try and educate the government and see do they know anything. And 4 years later, I'm gobsmacked with the amount of information I have, which we could run a couple of shows on this, really, what we know in Ireland, what's not being said in the EU, and so forth. So that sort of got me on. Then it's morphed into Project Morrigan with the thing. So just quite briefly, yes, I've had an interest in this all along, and that's where I'm here this evening. It's just after maybe 50 years of being involved in this, that's why I'm here. And over to you, Rob.
Well, mine's going to be very short. I was a big X-Files fan, Vinny. I'm sure you were a fan as well. The X-Files. Massive fan of the X-Files. To be honest with you, the reason why I'm interested in it, what ignited me to get interested in it again, was listening to David Fravor speaking on Joe Rogan, and it just spiraled from there. And when I get very interested in something, I get laser focused on it. And so I started doing my research, and I started getting a little bit sort of tied into it and falling down a rabbit hole. But for me, it was the data. It was the anecdotal evidence. It was the data that I started to see, started to read about, the testimonies that people were giving anecdotally on podcasts and stuff like that. And I was like, there's something to this, there's science to this, there's data there. So, data for me is really important because it solidifies that there's a there. Now, I'm not going to say what it is. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely worth chasing. And from a science background, for me, I think where we're at right now has really come a long way over the last 7 years. I mean, like Lou has gone from there as an example to leaving his job to where he's at now. There's legislation being put in place going forward. Let's hope that passes. But for me, that's the instrument of my interest, is the data and the efforts that we put into this. But I just want to preface as well that it's not the NHI focus for me, really, to a point. It's the human story to this. And like even like Lou's book and his journey and everything that you're doing, Vinny, and everything that you're doing, Chris, you have your stories. And I'm really interested in the human element of this, considering it's non-human intelligence that we're talking about, but it's the human effort that really gets me. And the energy that Jeremy Corbell puts into this is just like, wow, like, look at the energy this guy is putting in. So he kind of drew me into this in terms of that. So that's where I've been, and that's where I am now, just doing the research. listening to other people, talking to you guys, and I'm very privileged.
I can relate to a lot of what both of you said. Yeah, that's why I had a smile on my face there. So it reminds me of me. And I was researching for a decade plus before I sort of put myself out into the public and that. And, a lot of people do watch me here on the show and think, hey, he's a podcaster, but I think I'm a researcher through and through. And that's what kind of drew me into the field, and things evolve, but that's just really interesting. And I'm glad. Now, one thing that I want to say to you both and the audience is that you've both got your kind of individual projects happening in Ireland, but with somewhat of a crossover as well, because, you are quite a small country as we are here. But one thing I have noticed over the years is that Ireland always does come into the conversation with sightings here and sightings there. And I know we're going to get into a few of those in a little while, but let's look into the kind of projects that you're working on. Rob, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you, because you recently launched UAP Ireland, and it's a great website, and hopefully you can just take us through kind of what made you kind of want to take that next step with what you're doing and your involvement in the subject, and any kind of plans and goals that you have going forward.
Yeah, well, I have to say it's not just me, it's a collective effort. So there's 2 other individuals that work in industry that have put a lot of work and effort into this. So by no means is it just me. I think it's a joint effort, and they have the same mission as myself. I suppose really when I look at our mission on the About Us page on the UAP, it basically just stipulates, look, our mission is to advocate for disclosure through sharing the current integration application of the highest quality evidence-based knowledge surrounding UAPs. That's always been the underpinning drive for me. So it's about really kind of fostering decision-making that can improve the knowledge of the subject, remove the stigma from the subject, and look at the political climate surrounding the subject in itself. And this kind of ties then into what Chris is going to get into. So we're really dedicated towards, the pillars of transparency, collaboration, looking at innovative scientific practice. Where does that fit in the conversation, just like the Soul Foundation regarding the subject, and really tapping in on academia, tapping in on resources like yourself of information, and driving traffic to channels like yours and other people's, and making it sort of a goal to discuss this openly in a safe environment where it is very much science-based. So for me and the rest of the guys, the website was a resource tool where people could just dip in and out of. That is an Irish resource tool to educate as many people as we can within the populace. I have children. I have 4 of them, and they're all different ages, but they're very interested in this topic from a scientific point of view. And STEM research is really something that's come into the horizon in Ireland over the last 10 years, and it's going from strength to strength to strength to strength. And with my background in many different universities and working with different universities and commissioning, studies for evidence-based practice and whatever it may be, to ensure, services that I manage run better. I think it's the same for the UAP. It's a scientific process. We have the resources here in Ireland. We have the academia here in Ireland. We have a very flexible workforce. And STEM research is, I think, the center of that. And that's something I'd like to get to. And maybe Project Morrigan could be that vehicle to deliver that. So that's where I'm at.
Fantastic. That's really great. Okay. And I'll make sure that the link is in the description for everything that we discuss in this interview. So yeah, that does kind of cross over great to Chris, the work that you're doing now with Project Morrigan. So please tell us how it came about and what your kind of intentions were.
Okay, with Project Morrigan is quite simple, okay, and we can talk about the stuff. So there's NHIdisclosure and there's Project Morrigan, and they're both separate. I was absolutely delighted when I reached out, when Rob and I made contact, because the time could not be better. They have a UAP Ireland website set up, and I have so much information on UAP that I want to share. Credible information, documented, Ireland, EU. If I say something, I've got the paperwork all around me here to prove it, So just going back a little bit, I was out one evening and I saw, I am fascinated at the role of the Irish diaspora are playing in this. And that includes I have English family, so the Irish, English, this part of Britain, I know some people may get hung up in it. I'm not, we're practically, we're cousins. We're all cousins, so there's no difference there. So I'm fascinated at the role that the Irish diaspora are playing. Like you mentioned Colin Kelleher, we have Christopher Mellon, Sean Cahill, Danny Sheehan. I could go on for ages mentioning the Irish Americans involved in this and push it, even Senator Reid. And we're talking before that we're so happy when I found that Sean Kirkpatrick is Scottish. Thank you. There's no Irish connection there. I was happy. So that led me into this, and I sort of quote by JFK that one man can make a difference and everyone should try. Okay, so that was the spark that said, Chris, what can you do to make a difference? So that's when I created NHIdisclosure and started digging for documents. And something became apparent to me that I think, to a large extent, we may be looking at now. We'll use the word disclosure a little bit wrong. There's currently really two narratives. There's, okay, is it a threat? Is it not a threat? Okay, personally, I think it's a potential hazard. Is it a threat? Lou and Code no more than I would. And then there's the other aspect: is this a non-human intelligence dealing with the human race that we don't know about? Okay. There's also the third aspect that affects every single person in the world. Every living being, insect, animal in the world is affected by climate change. Whether we like it or not, we are facing a mass extinction event. Where like people are working hard or stuck in, Rob will notice I was stuck in the M50 last week and I was looking at cars and trucks just stuck in a traffic jam and going, UAP are there, and UAP are demonstrating apparently a technology that can free the world from this. And why are we not pushing that aspect? So that gave me the inspiration for Project Morrigan. So what I did was I sanitized. I don't know if it's an NHI. I think there probably is. Okay. In actual fact, I'm Irish, so I am, I was born a Christian, so therefore I believe in NHI, and it's guaranteed under the Irish Constitution, because the front page of the Irish Constitution is God, which by definition is an NHI. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the Von Daniken now, but the Irish government acknowledge that there is an NHI, and we also want an NHI to deal with. So I decided, okay, what can I do? So I created Project Morrigan. Now, Rob will probably get this. Morrigan was, in Irish mythology, a warrior goddess, and she would fight in battle. She'd be never defeated. She was determined to beyond belief, and she embodies everything that I think is good about the Irish and a good about Irish female energy, Mother Ireland or Mother Earth. So that's why I call it Morrigan, as a nod to the history of my land and our lands. Okay. So basically, Morrigan was the approach, I have it written down here, lads, was the approach to the House of the Oireachtas Parliament for the establishment of institutions dedicated to scientific academic study of UAP, which objective alleviating the climate crisis by encouraging credible research at national level with European institutions and United Nations. So I put Project Morrigan together, and I decided, what can I do with that? So in Ireland, we call our parliament Oireachtas. So if I say Oireachtas, that's basically a committee. It's a joint committee that has members. We call them TDs, you call them MPs, from the different parties. So they're objective. You won't have a party that will rule over. So there's a couple of different Oireachtas committees I decided to approach. There's one in the environment. They got Morrigan, they read it, they accepted it. They got back to me and said they'll be in touch. Okay, so I really wanted to go forward. So I went to the Oireachtas Committee on Public Petitions. Okay, so I lobbied them, and to get something in front of a Oireachtas Committee, you have to tick an awful lot of boxes. I know we joked the other evening that you can't lobby or you can't approach an Oireachtas Committee saying that everyone should have free curly whirlies. That's not going to happen. It must be credible. So it has to go through a process. Well, I saw the why disagree. Okay, so it has to tick a lot of boxes. It's got to be legitimate. It's got to be achievable. So on the 17th of November 2022, the public committee, or the Oireachtas Committee on Public Petitions, accepted Project Morrigan, and in doing so, if I'm correct, are the first government committee in the world to acknowledge that the scientific study of UAP could help alleviate the energy climate crisis. Now, whereas most other studies are going for a military advantage. Okay, and with Morrigan, what's good about it is it doesn't matter where it comes from. The fact that it exists in the first place begs scientific scrutiny. And that's the whole idea. And I think the Morrigan template should go global. Every country should have it. And it's about starting conversation. It's about starting conversation. What does UAP offers? Well, it can offer cheap, free energy. And that's what the world needs now. And we were talking to you the evening that we had the people at Stop Oil and this type of thing, and well-meaning people, and credit to people who are passionate enough to get up off their arses and do something. So I respect them that way. I may not agree with what they're doing. I disagree with that. Okay, but having said that, I agree they're passionate and want to do something. But if all these climate change activists and people in the world do that, this exists now. And why are we not looking into it? Like people say, oh, it's American tech, don't care. It's Chinese, don't care. I'm sure an element of it is, okay. But the fact, maybe there is, lads, guys, maybe there is, you know, some unknown phenomena that we've yet to sort of, you know, I suppose tap into. There's many things going on with UAP. So that's why I created Morrigan, and that's what Morrigan is about, okay. And more or less, I'm pushing really, really hard to get Morrigan over the line and push it out there. Like, this is the first podcast I've done with a camera on, first YouTube thing. Always want to be behind the scenes. Don't care about it. Like yourself, Vinny. But sometimes if I expect people to step out of the comfort zone and listen to me, or I'm saying, I've got to get out of my comfort zone, and I certainly am tonight, guys. So that's kind of where I am, you know.
Wow, that's
okay,
great.
so,
that's wonderful.
Yeah,
you raise a good point there as well, that, you know, there could be adversarial technology and there could be other things that are explainable when it comes to the things that are reported and seen. But we're always interested in that kind of 5% of unknowns. And it's been that way since Project Blue Book with the unknown cases. So I guess my question now would kind of looking at the government side of Ireland. Here in the UK, you know, since the 1950s, we know that Defence Intelligence was studying UFOs, and they had a very big interest in it. And there were, you know, there was a lot said right up until the late 90s, early 2000s with the Condign report. How has it been perceived and looked at when it comes to the Irish government, both historically and kind of recently?
Do you want to kick off with that one, Chris?
Yeah, I think I'll actually, that's probably more my jam, Rob. Okay, nothing to see here. Go away, Chris. That's the official narrative. However, go away, don't deny us. That's really what I suppose the attitude is. However, when you dig deeper and you'll discover documents, you'll find that that's not the case. I uncovered a document going back to the 1950s in the archives of the Department of Foreign Affairs. And I think it was a gentleman called Brennan and a gentleman called Boland. It was the early days of the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs, so I suppose there would have been diplomats. One of them went on to be the first Irish member of the General Assembly of the United Nations. So these are big hitters. And there's a memo coming from the United States to, I think, I suppose, the diplomat in the UK. And it's basically saying, flying saucers are real. I'll be checking this out in America. We know it's real, and Ireland should be getting prepared. Now, were all the FOIs I did for Ireland, that never came up. I stumbled across that myself. So that was interesting. I'm also working on, and I'm handing this little bit of research over to two other guys I'll mention now in a second, that in the UK, I think in 1950, it could have been set up by Churchill after the war, and it went into 1950, there's a flying saucer working party. I don't know if you, and it came up, nothing to see here. I've a list of names of people who were involved in one in Ireland, which once I discovered this, I rang Dr. Eamon Answer, my ICER colleague, and he said, didn't know that, Chris. So I have a list of names of people that Ireland actually had a flying saucer working party. I cannot prove that now, okay? But I have evidence pointing of a list of names. I was given a list of names of people to check out. I've checked them out, and they are the people who would have been involved if it did exist. Now, I'm handing that over to, I'm sure if you know, there's Carl Nally and Dermot Butler. They've written a few books on UFOs in Ireland, going back to 3 books. As Conspiracy of Silence, I think in 2006. Dermot Butler is a phenomenal researcher. So I was talking to him and said, listen, I don't have the time for this. It's not my area of expertise. So they're going to follow up on that. Okay. So we can sort of, I suppose, fast forward to where we are now to government. From FOIs, there, and I'm trying to be factual, really nail this down. Who saw the documentary Dope Sick? When they went looking for information and they were given truckloads of information. Okay. What happened was, I think somebody in the Department of Defence and Department of Foreign Affairs got a little bit annoyed at me. So I got, I suppose, hundreds of emails with links that are photocopied or have to type in. And what it appears to be, that there seems to be a third party that gathers intelligence and gives the Department of Foreign Affairs and Department of Defence in Ireland. Okay, so I haven't had the chance to, I'd have to bang them all in manually. And at this stage, guys, you know I'm not the most technically minded. But I scrolled through them and I found a few of them. And this would have been going to say the chiefs of defence in Ireland, and it would have been, say, the likes of the Politico articles on UFOs and UAP. So I know they got them. Okay, there's also an interesting, not sure if you noticed, in an Irish TD raised the questions in Ireland, and Dáil questions, 3 questions on UAP and UFOs. I think that was in 2021, Rob, and it was John Brady. He is, I don't remember that, okay. And the answers, he questioned a gentleman called Simon Coveney, who at the time was our Minister for Defence. He's since stepped down. I sent briefing documents to Coveney and I sent to the government, the president. So that's a different story, okay. So the answers that were given officially on Irish government record was nothing to see here. However, I had a letter from General Claudio Graziano that completely contradicted everything that Simon Coveney said on Dáil record. So I went after this, and eventually I have a letter from our current Taoiseach, which is Vice Prime Minister, Micheál Martin, who's our current Minister of Defence, and basically says that the EU share information on UAPs, but Ireland does not because we're not members of NATO, and that's from our Minister of Defence. So there's an awful lot going on. I could talk about this for hours in Ireland, lads, you know, and what the government knows, what it doesn't know, but there's definitely a trend. I got one from the Department of the Environment saying that all our UAP records are held at the Department of Transport, but yet nothing is supposed to exist this way. So I've got so much. I've got and we maybe I know we're stuck for time here tonight, guys. So we may do a deeper dive into this. So maybe we'll be putting, with your permission, Rob, we put this up on the website. So lots of documents and lots of stuff, you know, going on. So yes, there's an awful lot going on here. There is an interest in some of our politicians in UAP. I can tell by the ones that get back to me, and quite a few get back and ask questions and that type of thing. So there is an appetite. Officially, there's nothing to say, but that's not true because I know documents, they change tables. I'll just also mention that we also at NHI we also got the UAP, I suppose, issue raised at the Oireachtas Committee for Defence and the Oireachtas Committee for Foreign Affairs. The one for Defence was, and I wanted to get this on the public record, I sent them last year Schumer, I suppose, proposed legislation. And they read it out in a Oireachtas meeting and it's put on the Oireachtas record. I challenged the Oireachtas Committee on Justice, okay, on whether or not Ireland is in breach of international treaties by failing to investigate UAP. Because we're not mandated, there's treaties of the international treaties, we're not mandated, but we're obliged. So that's going around with the, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, no, I want to,
so that's it.
To jump in there because this is why, from a scientific point of view, and I spoke to you about this before, Chris. It's about really having this conversation and turning the pyramid upside down. So you know, it's great that the politicians are saying, "Oh yeah, this is great. We'll get it on record and stuff like that." It's really good that we do that. But the next conversation is, okay, you're saying there's nothing to see here. So I think it's up to us as a society or people in the science realm and people who've got connections like myself to get very much grassroots on this and to say, okay, rather than waiting for you guys to do something, we need to do something now. We need to create a coalition of individuals within STEM research. We are a tax haven for investment, especially foreign investment in Ireland. And it'd be great to find a particular area, or even in Roscommon at the minute, they have an observatory there. Why aren't we using these facilities to the best that we can, specifically around UAP? Because if we can catch our own data and collate that data and write a white paper on it, or even just some sort of paper that we can deliver to whoever it may be, to say, look, the evidence is there. Yes, we may be a country where we're neutral. That's fair enough. Yes. But at the same time, we have public airlines coming back and forth across Ireland, across Europe, across the UK, over to America. And I said this to you before, Vinny, as well. Like, if you look at where Ireland is positioned beside or by the UK, we're smaller than the state in America. We share the same airspace. So there's a partnership, there's a synergy there to exploit. So I think it's really about, okay, what's the next step? Well, we need to get data. How do we do that? And I feel that maybe the UAP website, it's only new, and conversations with yourself, Chris, it's all new. But if we build that up over time and create some sort of strategy, I think there is a way forward. Very similar to what Lou did with the 5 pillars. It's about sitting down, looking at strategy. And the great thing about American Safe for Aerospace, I hope I got that right, was that they used flight safety as the buy-in for the conversation. And look where we are. Look where we are now. You know, so look, it is what it is. So it's about finding that sweet spot where politicians can buy into this in terms of representing the constituents. So,
well, yes, 100%, Rob. I agree, and I think that's where the website is going to be. You know, that's where it's going to fulfill its potential. I really feel, you know, I'm honoured to be helping out a part of the website. Interesting, you mentioned air safety, because in the front of the newspapers in Dublin this morning, they're talking about, I think, Michael O'Leary from Ryanair's going mad over that we don't increase the passenger numbers in Dublin Airport. As I think I mentioned before, guys, they are trying, there's planning permission being put in at the moment for an extra 8 or 10 million passengers in Dublin Airport. Dublin is the main airport in Ireland, Vinny. I'm sure you probably know that. You know, for a single runway airport in operation at one time, it's pretty big. I have an objection in with Fingal County Council because we do not have, I suppose, procedures on investigating UAP. So I put an objection into the council and the extra passengers, and that's what we can do now. When we're just we're talking about the appetite Ireland has, I don't want to retract too much, but in Ireland we don't have an army as such. We have defence forces, we don't have an air force, and we have a couple of little fishery, a couple of boats, I suppose, that monitor our for fishery. We don't have any defence capability as such. Okay. What I found was there's a commission on the Defence Forces carried out 2 or 3 years ago. And one of the recommendations I uncovered for that was that Ireland puts in place procedures for investigating UAP. So this is another thing so there is an acknowledgement by the government that we have to address this issue. So what Rob is saying there, this ties in perfectly with what Rob is saying there about air safety and potential threats. And it's just purely because something in airspace with air transponder, you know, is by definition a threat. So yeah, Rob, excellent.
Can I just jump in there very quickly?
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Dr. Eamon Ansborough, he runs an observatory there in the Midlands, like I mentioned, in Roscommon.
Yes.
There's very little light pollution in Ireland. I mean, because we're so rural. I mean, most of it is around Leinster, around where I live, where you live as well, Chris. But if you look at the Midlands and the west coast of Ireland, they've got the highest sightings in Europe, next to France, when it comes to UAP or UFOs or whatever, whatever you want to call them in terms of that. But they recorded from the year 2000 to 2023, 40 UAP sightings, specifically above the Lough Key area in Roscommon, where there was only 2 particular types that were seen in terms of shapes, cylindrical and round. Now that's very specific.
Yes. Yes. Eamon is my ICER colleague. I've been up there quite a few times. It's a unique place. It's close to Boyle. The reason Eamon moved there was because, and it's a term I just like, hotspot, but I can't think of a better term, okay? Because that's why Dr. Ansborough lives there at the moment, because there's a hotspot there. And this goes back, and I cannot talk about ufology in Ireland without mentioning Betty Myler. Betty Myler was from Boyle and Roscommon. She started the Irish UFO Society, I think, in the late 90s. And this is allegedly in the Curlew Mountains there in Roscommon, there was a crash. Now, obviously, this is a story, okay? And the crash retrieval came in. It's covered in Conspiracy of Silence. I know Carl and Dermot, so I am plugging the book, okay? But, you know, they're just 2 Dublin lads. They covered it, and that's why Betty Myler started the Irish UFO Society. And I believe that's one of the reasons why Eamon has his observatory there in Roscommon. And Eamon lives there because apparently I think it was in 1996, something went down in the mountains. The area was cordoned off. Allegedly, there were soldiers in uniforms with no insignia, with nothing on them, with apparently American accents. That's as much as I can say for now. But that's part of Irish folklore. Carl and Dermot investigated, and they said there is something to it. And they didn't say a UFO crashed, but apparently something went down. Now, maybe it was an American aircraft. It could be, we're not saying it was definitely, but something apparently went down. And that's what tweaked Betty Myler to start the Irish UFO Society, and she ran conferences and that type of thing for a long time. So we have to give a little nod to Betty. But again, that's what you're saying. I'm sure Dr. Ansborough would be more than happy to get involved. And interesting enough, I was talking to Eamon recently, and I'll be just He's a colleague of Dr. Kevin Knut, who's also expressed interest getting involved in the technical side of Morrigan as an advisor. So it's all sort of coming into place. Sorry, over to you guys.
Did Chris Mellon give you the thumbs up?
Chris Mellon gave Project Morrigan the thumbs up, yeah, at the start. Good. I got it to Jay from Project Unity at the time when it's, he got it to Christopher Mellon, and Christopher Mellon, yeah, as an Irish American, said gave the thumbs up, yes. So I wanted to say more actually, but it got the nod. And it's again, it's the Irish. They asked for it. That's what I'm trying to exploit here with Danny Sheehan. And there's I would like to. I'm sure, Rob, you know the Kennedy Summer School, which takes place in Warford every year. No, check it out. It's basically it's for politicians and science, that type of thing. So we're working on getting Morrigan and fingers crossed, to the Kennedy Summer School next year. That's a little plan we have. That's something we're working on at the moment, as well as there's a chance it'll be going to Capitol Hill. So that's all I'll say for now. There's sort of feelers out, a bit of a good response when people who I won't name here because I haven't got the permission to name them. So they've expressed an interest in it, and yes, I'm taking over to the States. And this will be good because now we're showing that it's not just the United States and it's not the Department of Defense holding the secrets. Now we have something from Europe, from Ireland, from the UK. That normal people are saying, hold on, we're sick of this. You're holding on to, propulsion systems that could free us from, oil. Come on, fossil fuels. I think there's a chap from Dunabate, I think it's darkskies.ie. I'm sure I saw it on Twitter there. And he showed a wonderful picture there. He wrote imminent on the sand on the beach on Twitter. And it, got thousands of hits. I thought, that's lovely. But does he know that they're putting, I think it's about 100 of those, 100 of those silly billy, windmills for generating power out in Dublin Bay. I don't know, have you seen the plan for that, Rob?
Yes,
even your Greystones, yeah. So I'm saying if say our government and our, I suppose, establishment are expecting us to, to agree to this, the very least they can do is look into this. The very least, that's so that's kind of just a little bit more about what you're talking about, Roscommon. I'm sure Dr. Ans would be more than happy to get involved.
Yeah, well, I think if we dilute the stigma down and move it through a conversation where there's a lens of data that is having this conversation, or that is directing this conversation, that's important. Like politicians, when I commission studies, I do it for a very good reason because, I meet with politicians and I tell them why I'm commissioning this, and I do get the funding. I get it through myself, my own ways of getting it. But when they see the data, then they make decisions and kind of go, there's a need for this. And we have to kind of ask the question, what is the need around the context of Ireland, because we're a neutral country. But it's starting the conversation, which is very much important. And maybe, Vinny, someday we'll build up synergy between Ireland and the UK with regards to, the aerospace there to protect us.
Yeah, well, I have a question there. You mentioned there during this alleged crash retrieval story from '96 that there were Americans non-insignia uniforms. What's the relationship like between Irish Defence Forces and, let's say, the US military? Do they fly operations into any kind of Irish military bases or anything like that?
They use Shannon, don't they?
Over to you, Bob. Yes, they do. Yes.
They do. There's a very healthy relationship between the Americans and Ireland. I mean, we're like the 51st state, to be honest. We really are.
Yes.
I don't know, and they do use Shannon quite a lot. And there was a few protests before there in the past. Fair enough. You're always going to get lobbyists and stuff like that, but there is a very healthy relationship there. So I guess there could be a synergy there, from a transatlantic point of view, as a pathway for communication.
Yeah, so there is, and that's a historical relationship, right?
Correct.
Yes,
Correct.
Goes back, goes way back.
Castro. Castro.
We'll be America's little island off the coast of Europe. That's what we are, really. Obviously the connection between Ireland and America is immense. It really is big. Interesting, yes, an awful lot of American troops, when they be going to say Iran and so forth, they would stop off in Shannon. And as Rob said, there were some protests because apparently Ireland was turning a blind eye. I do not know if this is true, that maybe prisoners have been taken through, and that goes against Irish law that they can land in our because Shannon is still sovereignty of Ireland. So for prisoners to land there was kind of, I believe, a grey area that the authorities here weren't checking, and some people got very annoyed about it, rightly or wrongly. It's not for me to say, but Big connection between Ireland and the States. Interesting, we're talking that there could be there is a court case that took place a few weeks ago, and it's an Irish senator wanted to find out whether or not we allow the RAF to monitor and guard our airspace, because we have no F-type aircraft, fighter or interceptor aircraft. We just have a few single propeller that look fairly cool, but they they're not going to be much use for anything else. So apparently, and it's against Article 5 in the Irish Constitution of Sovereignty, Ireland allows, and not allows, and encourages, and is, thank you very much to the UK to defend our airspace. But this is something I've been working on with a journalist that I won't say too much about now, that this also extends to the Five Eyes, and Irish Canadian Larry Maguire, as you know, discovered there was a Five Eyes meeting in June last year, I think, in the Pentagon. And then Gary Hesseltine, my colleague from ICER and the UK Policy Reporting UAP, he found out through FOIs in the UK that there was a staff which employs more than one person from the UK were at that meeting, which is Five Eyes. But what was unique about this Five Eyes, and Vinny may know more about this than I do, that was actually to discuss UAP. What's happening is, and it appears that Ireland, from what my research is, I have a little bit of evidence that I can't discuss now, that implies Ireland allows the UK to monitor our airspace for the Five Eyes for UAP. That's what it's looking like. And I have, there's, I'm sure you know Niall Federer, who's a journalist. Niall is working on something, so he's going to be following up on this. So I don't want to say too much now, because I promise him he can roll with this, and rightly so, because he's a great guy, and he's pushed it so far with the topic here in Ireland in the mainstream media about UAP and so forth. So Niall will be running with this soon. So it looks like we have a little bit of I won't use the word evidence, but we certainly have sort of stuff that raise eyebrows, that Ireland does allow the UK to monitor airspace and look after UAP. Will I carry on a little bit without saying too much? The 2080 case off the west coast of Ireland, this is not stuff that Niall will be saying, okay, yeah, okay. I think actually Rob is going to talk about this case, Ireland. It's a 3-flight cruise, and they're going in, I think they're coming to land at London Heathrow. And I think it was a Virgin, a Norwegian, and a BA. And speaking as a private pilot, something that struck me strange was they said the objects pulled alongside and veered off. Now, meteorites don't do that, okay? So that was apparently or allegedly be looked after. The story was that the Irish Aviation Authority were going to investigate that. Okay, and they're the I suppose the body that look after air traffic, everything in Ireland. They police, they license everything, give pilots license and so forth. It's the Air Accident Investigation Unit that actually investigate incidents and accidents. Okay, so I checked it, I FOI'd them, and they replied to me without an FOI, just looking for any information they had on this case. And I was surprised that the Air Accident Investigation got back outside the remit of the FOI and said, you're all right, Chris, nothing to see here. So I said, no, carry on to the FOI anyway. So anyway, they said they did not investigate it because they're not asked to do so, which I thought was strange, because if you check their website for that day, I think anything that happens, like a Cessna 152 going off a grass runway, every incident, accident, or occurrence makes it on their website. It has to be reported. That's how aviation is, so mistakes aren't repeated. So I decided I'd FOI the Irish Aviation Authority, and they stonewall me. Now, they're not bound by the FOI Act because they're a private company. Well, they're semi-private. So therefore, for commercial reasons, you can't FOI. I'm sure you know the guys. I don't explain that, okay? However, I decided that I'm going to touch the Minister for the Environment here, and I said, I'm going to use an FOI because it's in the public interest. We're not talking about sort of a secret, commercially sensitive information here. We're talking about something that should be in the public domain. So they ignore me. Now, the next thing I'm going to say could be very useful for anybody who's seeking information from any government agency or anything in the world. There's a European legislation called AIE, which is Access Information on the Environment. Okay? Now, as the mainstream media at the time reported, that this could have been a space junk return to Earth. That gave me, I suppose, the premise of the idea that, okay, I'm going to put that spin on it. That is, by definition, a danger to the environment. So if any space junk lands in Ireland, that is a danger to the environment. So I sent in an AIE. They ignored it. So, cut a long story short, I raised that up with the Office of the Information Commissioner in Ireland, and they sided with me and said, the Irish Aviation, are bound to release that investigation report into that. And so far, they failed to do so, which gives me, I suppose, the belief that there's something bigger going on, that they're ignoring the Information Commissioner. And that is unprecedented because the next is the court. So go ahead.
Chris, can I ask you, is that the British Airways flight and the Air Canada flight that both spotted this?
I think it was the British Airways, Norwegian, and Virgin, if I'm correct, 2018. I believe so, yes.
Yeah, because I think it happened at 06:47 in the morning.
That's it, yes.
And the Canadian airline said
maybe it's Canadian.
Yeah, the Canadian airline described, or the pilot described at the time, that the lights were speeding very, very fast in a northern direction. So I don't think Space Jump goes north. I think it goes south. No,
it doesn't. Generally, yes.
Yes. But I came across at Irish Aero, which is a Twitter handle, and my dog is barking.
Yes, confirming your source.
Yeah, confirming non-human intelligence right here, licking my hand. At Irish Aero, so it's capital I-R-I-S-H, A-E-R-O, and that's their handle. And I think it's run by a guy called Trevor Buckley, but there is liveatc.net or liveatc or at ATC, which actually have a recording of that. Sorry, excuse me.
Yes.
No worries.
That's, I don't know, maybe that is, you can actually get the recording of the pilots reporting is there any activity in the area. I've heard it, yeah. Oh, hello.
Well,
no, right there.
Okay, yes, and it is fascinating. And you just heard the 3 flight crews talking about it. I'm sure you've heard of Finney.
Yeah, so where were we? Rob, yeah, I think you were continuing talking about that incident. You'd mentioned the crews. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, that is one, and there's 2 other incidents that happened. But what struck me as interesting is I like joining the dots, and there's always a pattern to a story if the story remains consistent and true. But patterns do tell stories on the other side, So there was one case there in Mullinahoe in County Tipperary. You probably know this one. Yeah, it's you can get it on the RT archives. It was in 1969, and there were several witnesses, 2 of which were a couple in their car, and they noticed something hovering about 750 feet above them to the west, and they described it as bluish type light / crimson type light. Now, and it looked foggy, and somebody said, was it one of those meteor balloons? Like, no, these things don't give off this light shift or whatever. So I looked into it, and it's very similar to the description of the change in frequency via the bubble that Lou was talking about in relation to the Doppler shift, which was interesting. And there was no noise emitting from this thing, and it was moving up and down, left and right. And there was almost like described that it was just a cloud that was just changing color each time it was moving. So that's an interesting one. And another person as well on the far side of the county saw it as well and described the very same behavior. And then it just shut off. So, make of it what you will. But I find it interesting with I'm not saying it is, but there seems to be a correlation in terms of, and I'm talking to other people as well, other witnesses too, in military, who described the same thing with this light shifting, and it's very hazy. It's almost like plasma, and that's an interesting one. And then there was another case back in where is it? 1962. I actually sent this to Jeremy Corbell. He found it interesting. This was back in 1962, and there was a pilot by the name of, what is his name? Captain Gordon Pendleton. I don't know whether that's an Irish name or not, but he was Irish. And he was flying a Viscount over Wales to Ireland. And he noticed something at high speed. Now, his constant speed was 300 miles per hour at the time in the Viscount. He noticed an object moving towards him from the left side and then shooting off to the right. Now, remember, when planes fly, they fly in different levels because that's their lanes. This thing was at level to them. So it couldn't have been a plane. And it shot off at 600 to 700 approximately miles per hour. And there was no signs of engines, and he said there's no signs of propulsion.
Wow.
Interesting. So, yeah.
I was about to mention that one, Rob. I have the Viscount case here. That just popped into my mind as well. And there's some wonderful footage. You're obviously talking about that, Rob, where the pilot gets interviewed. And they're outside the aircraft. It's a Viscount. They're there. Their caps on. It's black and white footage. And there was no ridicule. There was no sniggering, from the reporter. And that's what struck me about that case, is how little we've come on in certain ways. Like, that was taken serious by, I think it was an RTE report. But yes, a great case, Rob. Yeah, lovely, wonderful.
And I think he had his partner pilot with him. So, like,
that's right, his co-pilot, first officer. Yes.
Yeah. They were quite, like, they were very calm about it. They were like, this is odd. Never seen this before. And these are trained observers. I think Lou made a very good point in one of his interviews that I think it was on Joe Rogan, actually. And I never thought about it this way because I'm not a pilot, so what do I know? One of the guys that helped us build the website is a pilot. And Lou was saying that these trained aviators, and you've seen on the Soul Foundation talk, there was a particular psychologist lady that works very closely with NASA pilots. And she was advocating for how strong they have to be in terms of their mental capacity, psychologically, and observing. These guys are trained, these pilots are trained to be able to decipher friend or foe 100 miles away. Now, that's not far when you're on a plane, but to be able to make a decision, do I take this down or not? Or do I engage on this thing or not? Because if you engage on something, that's an act of war. So that's how serious these pilots are. So we really have to take on board what they're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're trained, they whether they can identify the aircraft or not, they can certainly identify propulsion systems, because you see things coming out of the back, you see, things like that, they can tell the difference between a MiG-25, I think it was, and something else, like you say, in a split second. So to see an object that has no signs of not only propulsion, but wings, ailerons, and all that kind of stuff. Each time Lou says that or someone says that, you really have to sit and think that what they might be seeing is so unusual to them. Of course, it's going to be, almost like quite shocking.
Absolutely. And especially too, like, fantastic in a sense, because David Fravor was, I think I'll paraphrase what he said, but he'd love to fly one of those things. Exactly. I mean, you're talking, you're talking a piece of technology that is banking. Like, if you look at physics, when something banks, it has to stabilize and the energy is lost. So it would bank down. It doesn't bank up. Even if we look, I'm not going to mention his name, but if we look at the gimbal, just in itself, it is banking and it's increasing in height. I mean, simply that says enough for me. I'm sorry.
But sticking with the kind of the gimbal, the go fast and that, let's look at the last sort of 7 years. How has the Irish media been reporting this subject since it kind of became almost globally mainstream post 2017? What's that kind of been like, both in like the newspapers and on sort of TV, let's say?
Poorly. Very poorly.
I agree with Rob. It has improved. I saw Sean Cahill being interviewed on a morning program there a while ago, and there wasn't the usual X-Files music. Come on, give it over, guys. Would you grow up? Just come on. Stop it. Okay, stop it. Okay, so we're on to okay. So that just really irks me. I think there has been a slight change. From my perspective, Alison Bray gave the first. She is a journalist for the Irish Independent. I think she works for Media House, so she'd be. I think Rob may know her there. She gave a half decent article, maybe I think in 21, about and she actually tried to cover the case about what I was talking about there about the West Coast of Ireland case, and she also got stonewalled. I was in touch with her about that. So she gave a half decent article, and then I think Noel Federer, who we mentioned before, has come. He's come with a couple of cracking articles. Okay, but generally the media has been fairly slow. I met with a reporter from the Irish Times last year, Conor Gallagher, and he's a crime and I think security correspondent for the Irish Times. And I reached out to him because he mentioned Morrigan in an article in the Irish Times, and I was just curious why, this type of journalist would be interested in UAP. So we sat down, we had a coffee. I had 2 coffees, and I'd say his head was spinning by the time he left. I probably gave him too much information. But I said, "So, hi Conor." He's a nice guy. I said, first thing I asked was, why are you covering UAP? And he said, well, our editors, he said, they've reached out, said I was given this, I was asked to cover it. He said, I've never been asked before, but I find it interesting and I want to know what's going on. And that's the Irish Times. So I think there is a change, there is more content. But having said that, the quality of it is still a long way to go. But I think there's a slight improvement, you know. So, yeah. But that's what. Sorry, go ahead, Rob. Go ahead, buddy.
No, I agree. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that's where we come in by giving credible information out there. That's our job, you know.
So I give you an example. I have a friend who works for Irish Media or Virgin Media UK in Ireland, and he's a producer. Yeah. I won't say his name, but he's a good friend of mine. And you know, he would be in contact quite a lot with Jeremy. So he's had Jeremy on twice on the morning Ireland. I think it's called Ireland AM.
Yes.
And Tommy Bowe, you know Tommy Bowe?
I know Tommy Bowe. Yes. Yeah.
Tommy absolutely loved the conversation. Yes. He's a very open mind, very scientific mind as well.
Yes.
And we had Colin Keller on 2 years before that. So
I saw that. Yes.
We're trying to drive it through that television program or even through that media platform. But it's interesting that we haven't really covered it that much. But Niall is doing a fantastic job. Absolutely fantastic. He really is. And he's one of those real journalists. And the thing for me is that, and I see it with the mainstream media in America and over here, the problem with the media at the moment is that they're being very easily snowed when it comes to having this conversation during a press conference. And I can't stress that enough. If these people, these media, these journalists really want to step out of their comfort zone, they really have to understand what they're questioning. Because it's very easy to shut somebody down on one question and not follow it up if you don't have the information with the hard specific questions. For instance, you know, you have, you know, systems and platforms, you know, that you use to, you know, track these things. The data is there. And you have Arrow saying, well, we don't have the data. And we're like, well, you do have the data, but you're not releasing it under the UAP disclosure or the classification. And the reason why the classification exists is because yes, they have sensors. I can name off the sensors now, but they have sensors. They can redact the display on those sensors very easily and show those UAPs. Yes. The problem is when you start showing a UAP and you start showing their behaviors, then the sovereignty of that airspace, of that military industrial complex is going to be put into serious question. Yes. But here's the thing. I don't think the public are going to come down hard on the government because of that. I think there needs to be some reconciliation here to say, okay, as part of the national security conversation, we need to be assessing, we need to be sharing this information with taxpayers and coming to a solution by having a very, very normal mainstream conversation with this, where the media can really push these questions and make these people accountable for what they do. So that's my 10 cents.
Yeah. That's great. And Chris, you're obviously like really pushing to get, you know, in with the government side of things. But Rob, could you potentially see UAP Ireland and the website be a kind of landing page for Irish journalists to kind of go where they might gain more knowledge on the stuff that they are potentially reporting on?
Yeah, 100%. And the fact that the discourse and the language that we're using isn't X-Filesy or it doesn't have any cheesiness to it. It's very much data-driven means of having this discussion. And I would implore journalists to just dive in and have a look at it and have the conversation, because the more they educate themselves, knowledge is power. So if you start empowering yourself with knowledge, then you can start asking the hard questions.
And the more that they get better at understanding it and reporting on it, then the public become more aware through their reporting, because it's good reporting with, you know, backed up by things that they've learned doing their research for their articles, etc. So it has a knock-on effect that just, you know, spreads across the whole of the kind of public realm.
100%. And that's why, like, Ryan Graves was very, very clever when he brought the UAP context in the situation of, you know, safe aerospace. You know, we don't know whether they're aliens, we don't know this, we don't know that. But the fact is, there's a there, and there's a potential for us to buy into one of these things.
Yeah.
You know, so it's about how we approach that. What's that sweet spot?
And I think that's where Gary Hesseltine and the UK Pilots Reporting UAP, that's where on this side of the pond, like I'm looking after the Irish end of that for Gary, Dave Halloran, and I think it's Anna Foster. So I'm the Irish representative for the UK Pilots. purely because we share airspace, and any transatlantic aircraft going from the UK goes through Irish airspace. Interesting that we're just talking about journalists there. An awful lot of time when somebody's underage in Ireland, it'll be Dr. Answorth, it'll be Eamon. And I had a few beers with Eamon a while ago, and he's telling me that what happens is a journalist will reach out to him, they'll interview him, they'll ask him a few questions, and he'll answer. And then when it's finished, oh, by the way, I saw this a few years ago, or a friend of mine saw this. What do you think it is? So there's quite a few journalists have had their own sightings, or a family or friends who've had encounters. And when the mic is off, when the interview is over, and I think that's important. That could help push the narrative forward, push the conversation forward. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and that's all it takes sometimes is to open up that conversation, and then it just grows and grows and expands, and then more people feel comfortable talking. But one thing I'd like to touch upon, we're getting close to the hour point. One thing I'd like to touch upon is, like, we've talked about some historic cases there in Ireland, but let's look at the big picture of Ireland over the past few decades to now. Is that there seems to be something that, and maybe Rob, you could probably expand on this. What they were seeing then is kind of very comparable to what's happening now. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, this isn't new. It's not like it's different from back then to now, and this goes for other countries. Do you know where I'm coming from?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even when I said around the whole Doppler shift, viewing point of people experiencing what that looks like, they didn't have a word for it, but now we have a word for it because we're more sound in terms of the information and the data that we have. This isn't just people viewing this. This is sensor systems picking these things up. And to have somebody back in 1969 and 1962 to collaborate what they've seen compared to what trained aviators are seeing, at Mach 3, Mach 4, Mach 5 is astounding, absolutely astounding. So there's a commonality there. And it's not like they're sharing these stories. Oh, I'll tell you this story in 1965 or 1969, and you tell the same story. These are separate cases, and they're all describing the same thing. So there's a correlation there. There's a there. We don't know what it is. But from a scientific point of view, it's worth chasing.
Yeah, and the thing is, we know that this is a global phenomena, and you both are a prime example of two citizens in a very small country putting the work in to try and forward this conversation in the public domain, in the government side of things in general. What would your messages be to anybody watching this from another country who think, well, my government's not doing anything, I'm waiting here? Is there something that people in other countries can do where they're not in the US, they're not in a huge country where things are happening?
I'll kick off. Just read the material, get yourself interested in terms of knowing other people's stories, talk to people, share information, build social capital. I mean, the amount of people that I've met in the last 2 years, I wouldn't have put myself here 3 years ago, because I'm just having a conversation, and it has to be a positive conversation with a goal in mind, finding people with the same values and the same interests. And I think when you start speaking that particular discourse, you will attract people and you will remove the stigma. So find those people. Find those resources, speak to people in academia, get as much information as possible, share that information with other scientists, because at one stage, somebody's going to pick that up. And from my point of view, my advice would be, and I said it to Chris, build on as much data as you can to make an argument so that people will actually listen to this within the context of scientific scrutiny and saying, okay, we need to sort this out. And one politician will have some sort of touch point where they'll kind of go, oh, that correlates to my mandate, I'm going to follow that up. So just keep pushing.
Okay, well said, Rob. I couldn't have said it better myself. My take is that we're not observers in this process. We're not standing back and waiting for other people to do it. I think we should be doing something. So everybody, and I know it's something that I think Ross said a few years ago, that he just wrote to people, find out what the landscape is in your own country. Find out who's who the players are, politicians. And unfortunately, it has to be politicians a lot of the time. Write to them, hold them accountable. Write to your local politician and say, will you look into this on my behalf? And keep going. I've probably sent out thousands of letters. Okay, the post box around the corner for me does be full sometimes. Thousands of euro I spent on printers after burning out a few times. So just get your information, be factual, and ask the questions, and just see what comes back to you. Just see the information comes back. We're not observers. We can push this because there's millions and millions of us. And if everyone, like I often sort of say when people are, this isn't happening, we're not getting disclosure, well, get up off your arse and do something. You know, that's all we have to, and that's it, you know, stop whinging and moaning. What have you done? Nothing. So shut up, you know. So that's what everyone should do something, and everyone can do something. As JFK said, one man can make a difference, and everyone should try. And that's what we should. That's the attitude we should have. And be fearless. Go ahead, Rob. Of course you can, buddy.
And it's something that somebody said, and I think it was Ross Coulthard that said it. This is why I like Ross. He's one of those Watergate journalists. You know, he's brilliant.
Yes. Yeah.
We have the potential to be journalists ourselves. We have a smartphone. We can we have our own channels, you know, or whatever it may be. You know, get the information, put it up on your website, put it up on your social media, and throw it out there. You know, it doesn't have to be all UAP, but look at the science around it. Drop it into people's, you know, emails. Put it up on your social media, on your Instagram, whatever it may be. Use that as a means to share, but do it not for likes, but do it for sharing information that's credible.
Yes.
Because the problem is that we're faced with AI, and the problem is that that's making every debunker's dream come true. And really, we should be just chasing the data that is realistic. So stay true to the science, stay true to what is real. Use your social media, use your social capital, build on it like what you're doing there, Vinny. You're doing a great job. And you're out there. You're out there trekking up on mountains, you know, doing investigations. Get your hands dirty, meet people, you know, have these conversations.
Absolutely, man. And one thing I'd like to say before we go is to everyone watching, you know, we're talking about Ireland here, but, you know, go and check out uapireland.ie website. It doesn't necessarily relate specifically to Ireland because it relates to everybody. You can all find something familiar on that website. And even if it's an inspiration for you to start your own or do something yourself, that's almost even better. But it's a real good starting point. It's so well done, and it can throw you off in all sorts of directions for research and ideas and everything. So use these tools put up by people like Rob. It's got information on Project Morrigan and the work that Chris is doing as well. I guess to finish off, guys, the best thing to do is obviously you've got that website, but where can people where can people keep up with what you're doing individually? Is there a specific social media page or anything you'd like to kind of put out there?
Yeah, Chris, you're on Twitter, aren't you?
I just joined. Yes, I figured out how to work eventually a few weeks ago. I'm on X. I'm on Twitter for the first time ever. My problem is I've no way to put it out, and that's why Rob is going to be a godsend to me and the guys in the UAP army, because I'll be doing all this work and it's sitting around me here in boxes. I forget about some of it sometimes. Always 3 or 4 things on the go at one time, and so maybe I'm sure they get in touch with me through the website, or else, and hey, you put my email out there. It's chrisg@NHIdisclosure.com. Actually, I even bought NHIdisclosure.com website, and I don't even know how to put it up yet. You know, it's something I must do sometime. You know, so that's there we are. Okay, it's an item to have, Rob. We could use it there. So that's it. I don't have any. No website or anything like as such. So maybe through the Irish website, you can get in touch with me, or maybe through X. And I'm just happy to help them. If anybody wants any tips on how to go about these things, I have a few little that we'll share another time. A few little tips that could be helpful. You know,
absolutely.
Wonderful.
So yeah, just happy.
Vinny, I'm just very streamlined. We've got the website. You know, you've mentioned it there, and the thing about the website is when you're searching it, you probably put the link in. It's UAP capital, and then it's joint to I for Ireland, which is capital, and the rest is lowercase Ireland. So it's all the one word. My Twitter handle is just @Robert E. Sheridan. It's a very patriotic name, Robert Emmett Sheridan.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Sheridan. Yeah. I'll tell you the story, Chris. Kitty Kiernan.
Yeah, go ahead, buddy.
Kitty Kiernan was my great grand aunt.
You're kidding me? Yeah. Actually,
Michael Collins.
Really? Michael Collins. Yeah. Well, interesting you mentioned that, because I know Noel Federer, one of his, I think his grandfather was he's one of the Patriots. I'm not sure what his name was, but he's also, so yourself and Rob are probably Rob and Noel, you're probably connected that way. Yeah. So
and my other half's second cousin is Liam Neeson. So you know. Okay. Well,
wow.
Interesting how we talk about, like, my father was in the RAF during the Second World War. You know, he ran away from home to put food on the table, and it's where people sometimes get confused. The Irish-Anglo relation are grey. You know, people say, "Oh, you're English, it's just your Irish." No, you know, his father was in the First World War. At the same time, my grandmother was in Boland's Mill getting the Patriots out. So it's where the whole thing is sort of, it's a grey area. So yeah, we've good Irish blood in us. We've good, decent green blood. We have, 100%.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Excellent stuff.
Listen.
Okay, Vinny, thank you, Rob. Thank you, guys.
Listen, the pleasure's all mine.
Yeah.
These are the kind of conversations I thrive on, because it's grassroots, it's people getting off their asses, like you said, and actually doing something. And that is where we all started. We all started by deciding one day that we're not going to sit and wait for information and things to come out and be given to us. We're going to get off our asses and actually try and do something and push this forward. And so I hold my hands up to both you guys. Like, absolutely amazing. Thank you both so much. And to everyone watching, please use this as inspiration to do your part, play your part, because the further we get is because with more and more of us are coming together from all over the world just to get that little bit, that step forward that we all crave so much. And so, gentlemen, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vinny. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
To everyone watching, as always, thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next one. For now, take care.
Bye. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Good evening.